I'm Dan from Hope Technology. Today I'm going to show you how to service a Pro 4 rear hub. You're going to need a hub support, a Pro 4 seal tool, our two bearing tools as well. This does the free hub and the main hub body. Some replacement bearings, some replacement pawls and springs, a hammer and a selection of punches as well. So first of all, what you're going to want to do is remove the free hub off the hub. You should just be able to pull that off in your hand. That'll obviously also take the end cap off, put that to one side. So once you've got the free hub off, you're going to want to remove this little 1mm washer inside. You can sometimes get it off with your fingers. If you can't, there's no harm in just using a pick and just grabbing it out. It can be sometimes a bit fiddly. So once you've got the washer off, just put that to one side. Now all you've got is just the axle in the hub, so you're going to remove the axle out. You need your hub support, make sure it's sat in, and then using the soft side of a hammer, you don't want to use the metal side just in case you damage the axle. You just want to give it a tap and it should come out. You shouldn't really need to use any excessive force. Once that's off, you can then take the non-drive seal off. You should then be able to pull the end cap off. If it's a bit stuck on, you can then just use either a set of soft jaw pliers or get it in the vice again with some soft jaws. Don't clamp it too tight, it should then just pull off. Put that to one side. Once you've got the axle now, you need to get this bearing off. I just clamp it in my hand like that. Same again, soft face with your hammer, and just tap it like that, and the bearing should come off. It shouldn't need any excessive force. If you wanted, you can put it in the vice if you just rest the bearing on and tap the axle out, but I just do it in my hand, it's a lot easier. Put that bearing to one side, check the axle for any damage or anything like that, then put that to one side. Next, you're going to need to remove just the other bearing in there. So just put that on the hub support. Grab quite a thick punch because you can get a bit more purchase on. Rest it on one side and then just work your way around the bearing. And it should come out pretty easily. Once that bearing's off, just put that to one side again, and then you've got just an empty hub shell. Once again, check that for any damage. Checking the interface of the bearings, anything like that, you can put that to one side. Now you've got your free hub, you're going to want to just take off the seal, so you just lip that over and push that off. And then once, same again. And whilst you're all, when we're going to clean it as well, that'll be a second time just to check for any damage. Put that to one side, remove your pawls and springs. You should just be able to get these out with your hand. Once they're all removed, if it is very greasy and mucky as well, just wipe off any excess grease. We'll obviously give it a proper clean once all the bearings are out. Same again, check for any damage on anything. To remove the bearings out of the free hub body, you're going to want to grab just a smaller punch, very similar to the Pro 4 front, it's just got an inner sleeve. You're just going to want to push that to one side and it should expose just a little edge of the bearing. So if you push that to one side, rest it on a flat surface and then just give it a tap. And then it should, the bearing should come out as well as the inner sleeve. Put that to one side, put the bearing to one side. Now to get this bearing out, still use quite a small punch because there's not a lot for you to get purchase on. This won't properly fit into a hub support, so if you can rest it in your hand and just tap it round like that. Like that, and your bearing should come out. Once all the bearings are out, both your free hub and your hub, give them all a good clean with a rag. If they are very mucky and the grease is all black, you can use some form of degreaser. Just make sure all the inside of your ratchets especially clean, because you don't want to be putting brand new grease into just muck basically. So give that all a clean. If you've got an airline as well, that's kind of a good tool to use just to displace a lot of the grease as well that's in the ratchet. And whilst you're cleaning everything, check for damage, check for any marks. If you've had a free hub or hub that's not been serviced in a while, the paws can deteriorate basically because the grease isn't fresh. So check for any damage, wipe away any excess grease, anything like that. Once you're happy with the hub shell, checked for any damage, it's all clean, you can then proceed to putting the new bearings back in. In this case, I'm using a press. If you don't have a press, which I know a lot of people won't, you can use a hammer using the same drifts as well. If you're using a hammer, you've just got to be careful that you're knocking the bearing in straight. Obviously, if you have a press, I'd definitely recommend you use that. The bearing will sit in a lot smoother and straighter as well. First bearing you're going to want to put in is the drive side hub bearing. Just first of all, just place it in with your finger, kind of that it's almost straight. Grab the seating tool, just rest the hub on a flat surface and then press the bearing in. It shouldn't need any excessive force or anything like that. You should just see that the bearing's sat in just after that lip. Check that it's smooth. If there's any notches or anything like that in a brand new bearing, it's more than likely that the bearing's not actually sat in straight. Next, you're going to want to put the axle in like that and just push it. Grab your other bearing, place that on. This is a really good way of doing it because then the bearing is actually going to go in straight because it's got the outer shell guiding it in, and also then the axle as well. For this, you're going to want to use both tools, so you're going to want to put that one back on that inside bit and then that top tool. And then once again, slowly press that in. You use that on the inside of that axle because if you're knocking from this side, more than likely that bearing's going to then come displaced. So if you keep that on there, it's going to keep that bearing pushed in and keep the axle pushed in. Once the two main bearings are pressed in, once again, feel if it's smooth, it should be. If there's any notches, there could be a bearing that's not sat in straight. You can then put that to one side. You're then going to press in the free hub bearings using the free hub tool. So you're going to want to put that onto a flat surface, place the bearing in once again, and just press that in. That should just sit up flat against the top of the free hub. Turn it over, don't forget to put the inner sleeve in. Put the next bearing in, that will sit in lower. Grab your drift and press that in again. You'll feel it butt up against each other. The inner sleeve goes a bit tighter as well. If the inner sleeve's loose inside and has a lot of play, there's a bearing that's not properly seated in, so just double check. If you are tapping them in with a hammer, you'll know once they're seated because the sound changes. Once you're hitting them in, it'll be quite hollow, and then when it actually sits in, it'll go like quite a dead sound. As I say, if you are hitting them in with a hammer, you just got to be careful that you're putting them in straight. If you're not putting them in straight, it can damage the inside of the shell, which can then cause other issues when you go to put the bearing in properly. Once you've got the bearings pressed in, you're going to want to rebuild the free hub. So first of all, I'd grab your springs and just put those in all around the free hub. Make sure they're sat in properly. Make sure they're the right way as well. Now your pawls, what a really good way of doing it is if you just push the pawl in, push the spring in with the pawl, you should then just be able to slide it over like that. You don't need to get a pick or anything like that. Just push it in. Can be a bit fiddly. If you need to use a pick, that's fine. You can use a pick just to press the spring in, but you should be able to just do it in your hand. Like that. Once all the pawls are in, just make sure that they are firing back. They should have obviously fire back quite quick. Make sure the springs aren't half sticking up, just push them down a bit. Then you can put just a light bit of grease. I put a light bit of grease in between the pawl and the spring, because obviously that's where a lot of the movement is going to be. Next, you're going to want to just put your green seal back on. That should just click into place fairly easily. Once again, double check all the pawls are firing back, the bearing's sat in fine and it's running smooth. Now we can move on to the main hub. What you're going to want to do, you just want to push the non-drive seal in, just with your hand, just push it down smooth. If you're going to put any grease on, I'd just put it in between the axle and the seal, and that's basically just so that the end cap isn't running dry against the seal. Sometimes if your hub's squeaking or anything like that, it can be that. That should then just push on. Once again, always double check it's running smooth. You're then going to want to put your 1mm washer, just drop that down on the axle, that'll sit on there. And then to actually put grease on the inside of the hub, I tend to just basically go halfway, just like that. So fill half the hub with grease. Once it's all spinning, all that grease will get round. So then you're going to want to basically push the free hub onto the axle, and then to actually engage the ratchets, if you just push it back, it'll clip in like that. Then the seal has to be seated. You can just seat it a little bit with your hands, and then you're going to have to use the seal tool. You can either press it in or you can just tap it with a hammer like that. You'll know that it's sat in properly because your hub won't pull out easily. It's quite in there. Double check that it's spinning free. And then last of all, you're just going to want to put your end cap on that side. Double check it's all running free. And that's it, that's your hub serviced.